Jen, thank you so much for being here today. I am so looking forward to talking to you because I have a ton of questions. I'm so intrigued by this whole concept, but thank you for taking out time. So awesome.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Deanna, for having me. I'm so excited to be here today and to chat with you.
Yes, I can't wait. This is going to be a good one, guys. So you want to listen in. So I want to get started in the beginning, right? Your journey from physical therapy to Pinterest marketing, and now you're a content strategist leveraging human design. That is an incredible journey. Like, what inspired you to pivot to all these to this to get you where you are today?
Yeah. I would have to say, like, my initial part of my journey being the physical therapist, I was in therapy practicing for 13 years. And I think it was one of the catalysts was when I became a mom. I started to have that drive in my heart that I wanted more freedom. I wanted to be home with them more. And it took a long time to, I guess, at one side of things, start weaning myself down from working hours, start figuring out what else I wanted to do so that I could be more present with my kids. And I had started looking into like virtual assisting. And so I started looking into that. I started, you know, become like looking at ways to become that like virtual work from home. And I was kind of a 1 foot in, 1 foot out for 2 years. My LLC had been on file since 2018. And I had, every time things got hard or scary, I would just go pick up more shifts at a hospital. And that was my solution. So it was just, I was kind of back and forth with it. And then in 2020, everything changed from where I was working, I was working in the healthcare field. So I was in the hospital. And I had already started working part time. And I was actually at that point, I was doing more on call work. So it was just like that little nudge that I needed. And with all of the craziness that was happening in the hospital, it actually, my kids coming home for months from school and trying to balance my job and things like that, that was the catalyst that really like lit the fire to start booking clients. And so from a VA perspective, I niched into Pinterest because I was like, I love Pinterest. I love the content side of things. I'd always loved doing content. I had done blogs before. I had been a blogger before. And so it was a natural fit. But the situation that with everything in 2020, that's what prompted me to actually book out more of those clients and work up the courage to actually say after December, I'm done. So
Wow. I think so many moms can relate to that story and just wanting that freedom to be home and available for their kids, but also being really afraid, right? The 1 foot in, 1 foot out. It's like, oh, I don't really want to let go of the security, but I really want that. And I think I know that pool. I know what that feels like too. So I think a lot of people can. Well, you got into human design, and I want to definitely talk about that and find out a lot more and how it relates to content. But for those who might not be familiar, and I'm only a little bit familiar with human design, can you talk about what that is?
yeah, so human design, if you're completely new to it, I like to say or equate it to other, let's say, assessments, personality assessments that you may have taken. The Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, DISC, many of us are familiar with those assessments. And those assessments really help you understand yourself at a deeper level, how you best work in different situations. It really helps you uncover more of who you are. And in a sense, it helps you make decisions, whatever you're working on, whether it's with your business, whether it's your family or your career, and just to help you stay more in alignment. Human design is very similar in that it helps you connect at a deeper level with who you are. It helps you uncover more of your unique strengths, talents, and gifts. And it also helps guide you as to making those decisions to keep you in alignment so that you're working towards, your goals in an authentic way. But instead of being based on a series of questions that you answer, human design is based on your birth information. So like the human design system itself is made up of 4 different like ancient practices or sciences. So it's based on astrology, which is why your birth information comes into play. It's based on the chakra system, the Chinese I Ching, and the Kabbalah all come together to make up what you would see in your human design chart.
It's so interesting. I did take that test to find out, and I don't recall everything that I am, but I know when I was looking at it, I am like, this is so crazy accurate
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
who I am. And it does really make sense, which is so crazy to think that just your birthday can really tell you so much about you.
Mhm.
So how does human design, so you take this quiz, it's really not a quiz because it's your birthday, there's nothing
Yeah.
you can really change about it, but how does it become a game changer for your business?
Yeah. So when you enter your information, there's a lot of different free softwares out there that you can pull your chart from. That first piece of information you get is your human design type. And there are 5 different human design types. You're either going to be a generator, a manifesting generator, a projector, a manifestor, or a reflector. So once you understand just at that surface level, that overarching picture of what that human design type is, you start to see, okay, when I'm looking at like making a decision, whether it's like in your business, for example, if you're coming up on, a new offer that you're wanting to launch, new team members that you're wanting to bring in, new ways of shifting your messaging and your marketing, when you start to just at that top level look at your human design type, it actually guides you to, number one, understand what could be causing you to step out of alignment. And so you start to see certain patterns, certain themes. So when you are looking at your type, it will tell you your quote unquote your not self theme, which is human design. That's how what they phrase it as, but it's a fancy way. It's just another way of saying like this is where you're stepping out of alignment. This is what's going to be showing up more for you. So if you are a generator or a manifesting generator, you're going to be feeling more sense of this frustration. So many of us tolerate that not self theme in our businesses, and it's because of what we're saying yes to and what we're saying no to.
Mm.
So when you start to notice that and see those feelings come up more, you can start to get curious and find the source of where that frustration is coming from and how you can make just subtle tweaks to bring yourself more into quote unquote your human design signature theme, which is when you're stepping into that alignment.
Okay. So you
More
just
questions.
gave a whole lot and it's so good. And I'm like, okay, I get this. I see what you're saying, right? Because I can relate to some of the feelings of like when you're saying yes and you realize you should have said no and when things aren't really feeling aligned. But let's give a real example. So how do you know when you're not really being in your true self, right? And I can't remember exactly the phrase you just said, but you're not true self, or I think it was. how how does human design point that out? Like how do you know if you are or you're not?
It starts once you it's one of those things where once you see it, you can't unsee it. So
Okay.
the first step that I take when I'm like working with clients or, just working on your human design is to create more of that awareness. So once you start to ask yourself, okay, so if this is where I'm out of alignment and I tend to feel like if you feel that feeling of frustration when you're not in alignment or you're in your not self theme, you'll start to see where some of these instances start to show up. So maybe it's with certain clients that you're working with, certain projects that you're doing that feel drained. I've had clients where they've had one-on-one clients that some clients, like they get done working with a client and they feel really lit up depending on the person, depending on how they're delivering or the offer or the container. And they have other clients where they can't explain it. They just feel more drained. They feel more tired at the end of the day. So it's one of those things where when you start looking at where it's showing up, even in the subtlest of ways, that's how you can start to get a little bit more focused on what could be the cause, that root cause of that frustration. Because we all feel some of those feelings. We all feel that sense of frustration, but many of us, it's more of like this, I just feel frustrated and I don't know why, or I feel tired at the end of the day, or I feel drained at the end of the day, especially if you are constantly doing work or saying yes to the wrong things or going through your day to day more so out of alignment than versus in.
I can absolutely relate to that. In fact, as you're talking, I'm thinking of a client that I had that as an individual and a person, I thought this client was great. Could not say anything bad about them. But I dreaded working on their stuff. And when it got to a point where they ended the contract with me, I was so relieved. And not because they weren't a pain in the butt. They were so kind. They were great people, but I hated the job. And I could absolutely relate to this because it's like, why does this bother me so much? I really didn't understand what it was that I didn't like because it's the
Yeah.
stuff that I do. But there was something that just sat a little bit differently. And I have ripped it apart in my head so many times. Like, what was it that I didn't like? So I could relate. As you're talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, I could I totally understand this. And I think we've all been there at some point.
Mhm.
You talk about how human design can influence like what content that we post, or I think I saw somewhere even the platforms that we use, but I may be making that up in my head. What does that mean? How does it influence that?
So that this is like one of the things that I work on with my clients, and that's been a part of my own evolution from content creation and marketing into helping guide other entrepreneurs into with their marketing. So many of us are, when we come into business, we're taught to market a certain way. We have mentors that we work with, we have coaches, we have programs and courses that we invest in, and all of those are great. But usually we try to take what's in the box and just repeat the process that somebody else handed us. But maybe there's parts of that process that just don't resonate with you. And this is where, again, that not self theme can start showing up. So I've worked with clients where they've been told that they have to post a certain way or post a certain amount of content, or they have to show up on a specific platform, or they have to do video, or they have to, do things a certain way. And they'll do it, and they'll go through the steps because the process, this coach had success, other people are having success, so I should have success with the system. But when you are trying to implement something, and even if like 90% of everything you're doing works for you and it feels great, but there's just that one piece, that 10% that just isn't fully in alignment with you and you dread doing that. Maybe it's they're telling you to reach out a certain way on social media. Maybe they're telling you to like book calls or something. They're just telling you a part of the process that they have given you just isn't something that works for you. So what
Yeah.
they do is they still try to push through and force that system. And over time, that not self theme is there. That frustration builds up, that, feeling of resentment and everything that all builds up over time. And then what we tend to do is just kind of burn down the entire system. So it's your content. We tend to look at like, oh, content doesn't work. I get so burned out. I can't post, I can't do this a certain way. And so we tend to just burn the entire thing down versus looking at the parts of the process that can help guide us. So when I work with clients, I look at first, like their different types, their human design type can help, number one, figure out a process and a system that's going to be sustainable for them, because what one person can do consistently over time might not work for somebody else. So it's looking at the different parts of the system. But then it also, we dive into like the messaging and like the way that you're showing up, the words that you're using, and how you're speaking to your audience. And number one, not only relating it to who you're trying to talk to, but looking from your human design, you can figure out the key strengths and gifts that you have and highlight those in the way that you show up and serve. So for example, if you are a photographer or if you are a web designer, if you're a service provider, everybody's going to say that they solve a specific problem very similarly. But if you know your strengths and what makes you unique based on your human design, you can really showcase that as your USP in your marketing and in your copy. And that's what can start to set you apart in your content creation.
That is insane. I had no idea when I took that test because I took it a while ago because I have a longtime member in my membership group. She is collective, who is very much into human design and learning it. And so that's where I heard about it first. So she gave me
Yeah.
the link to take the test and I did. And at first it was overwhelming. So if you're listening and you're like, "Oh, I want to take this test too." It is confusing. You do need somebody, in my opinion, I needed somebody to kind of take my hand and say, "What does this even mean?" And you do that. You explain it. But I love that you're taking it a step further and saying, "Well, wait a minute. Like, here's really if you're going to market your business, like here's where you bring the value because it tells you right in this I hate calling it a test because it's really not a test. It's an evaluation, right? What is the term you guys use for that?
I just usually say it's right. It's in your chart. Like
Your
it's you're
chart.
pretty much,
Perfect.
you
Yes.
were born with
So
it. Yeah.
it tells you, right? Yeah. So it tells you in your chart where your value is, and then you understand what type of content. Because I help people create content to learn how to create content, this is like an aha moment for me. I'm like, oh my gosh, because what works for me may not work for them. And I do say that, but then they're like, well, what works for me? And I don't know. I can't tell them what works for them. But this chart can absolutely tell them what works for them.
Hmm.
It's almost like it's brilliant. I love it. I love it. So you talk about your messaging, right? So once you identify this your chart and you see where you fall, you know the type of content, you know where your value is. And that's when you start to work with them on their messaging, correct?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what's some of the biggest mistakes that you see with entrepreneurs and their messaging prior to working with you?
A lot of times I hear that they get to this point where they just don't know what to say. Like they're throwing spaghetti at the wall. They're testing all the different ways to say things. And yes, I think when you just there's a benefit to just start to just create content and to just start practicing and playing with your messaging and seeing kind of what sticks. Like there's a really good like benefit to that. But when you look into like your human design, that can help number one, just tell you a little bit more about yourself and can give you like that first foundation from which to speak from. So, and just again, even starting with your human design type, it just gives you this overarching picture of if I lean into my strengths as a manifesting generator or as a projector, this is at least a starting point in the positioning I can take with my messaging, and it will give me just this little bit of a slight edge over everybody else. But yeah, that's one of the biggest mistakes I see is people not knowing what to say, and they kind of tend to adopt what other people are doing in their industry, and then they end up kind of not standing out from the noise and everything else that people are seeing in their feeds.
It's so interesting. Can it help you? And I don't know if it can do this or not, but can it help you identify like your dream client who you really want to work with?
It can, yeah. So it's so cool once you dive into some of the pieces of your chart, the deeper levels of your chart, because when you have an idea of, you know, if you're in business already, you likely have an idea of the clients you're working with, the clients you enjoy working with, the clients you maybe don't enjoy working with. So you have that sense of who you want to work with. But when you look at what makes you unique, what your strengths are, you're going to be able to see a little bit more clearly who you're designed to work with, who's going to be a better match for you in terms of the clients that you're working with, what levels they're at in business, what their goals are for business, what problems you want to solve and you're really good at solving. So it's almost like it's like we walk through life sort of knowing what we're good at. Some of us have a really good handle on it. Those of us that have done like other inner work have a good idea and are very self-aware. But the human design chart, it's a more of a blueprint or just a roadmap to help you figure out like, and kind of a very validating tool that, oh, I kind of always knew I was really good at that, but this is telling me that I should really start to emphasize that more in the way I'm speaking to my audience and the clients I'm wanting to attract more of.
This is all so interesting to me. So unbelievably interesting. I'm like, oh my gosh. It almost feels like this weight is lifted because instead
Yeah.
of trying to figure it out, it's like, wait a minute, it's already figured out for you. All you have to do is is pay attention to what's on your chart and have somebody really help you understand it, like dig into what it really means. So if somebody is just starting out, right, in their business and they're not really sure about this human design or even creating content, what tips do you have for them to kind of start seeing results, to get started?
I would say number one, don't be afraid to experiment. Like look into like your human design. So from a human design perspective, look at your chart, start diving into your human design type, start diving into your strategy and your authority. Those are other pieces in your chart. Those are kind of the key players to get started with. But also don't take verbatim whatever you catch on YouTube, whatever you read in the books, because you're going to get typed and you don't want to live by the label. It's more of looking at your human design, but what does it mean to you to be that manifesting generator? What does it mean to you to be that projector or that generator? Because one generator is completely unlike another. And it really is going to be very, very specific to you. So it's really doing some of that inner diving and experimenting and just playing with what feels more in alignment. Where do you notice that frustration coming up, and letting that start to guide you. And when you get into like your authority and human design, that's where you can get into some of your making those aligned decisions, so things like that to get started. From a content perspective, the more you're exploring and playing with your human design, I would say where do you see that now in some of the work you're doing? Because some business owners, like you've maybe had clients, but you just haven't started to, you've done like clients from referrals and networking, but you haven't started to put your message out there, or you're wanting to expand that message. You're trying to find that message based on some of the work you've already done. So look at the clients you've already worked with, look at some of the wins and results that you've gotten for them. Look at what they're saying about you. Look at the questions they're asking you. What are people coming to you for? And that will help give you just that couple of pieces of foundation to just figure out where to start, at least start with your content and your messaging. And stories is another one I dive into quite a bit as well. So it's how can you share some of your own experiences, your client experiences in your content.
So I'm going to ask about you now for a second. When
Yeah.
you first started getting into human design, like what was your aha moment? Whether it was about creating content or whether you about going in the right direction or your ideal client, like what was your first aha that you had?
Yeah, it's so I kind of stumbled across human design when I was running my Pinterest marketing company. I had been at a point where I was booked out and I was at a crossroads. I was like, I can't take on any more clients and I don't know where to go from here. And all the advice that I got was you have to scale SOPs, subcontractors, or you could go into a group program. And I had been just starting to explore human design on the side for myself. And one aha moment was it helped me figure out, I would say it wasn't like a perfect shift, but it was a series of shifts that I've made. But it helped guide me in that first step, that first direction of, you know what, I don't really want to go a full agency model right now. I want to be more in the education and the coaching and the training. And I went and shifted into the group, but the group aspect of things. And as I started getting more and more into human design and started to blend the human design into what I was doing, because that was the other aha moment. It was like, okay, I've always been creative. I've always loved to create content. I've always loved to do these things. And I love to teach on it. So this is the next step for me. But I also see this gap where, this tool being so helpful to me could also be helpful to the clients that I'm working with. And so that started at just that process of, I was still doing Pinterest, making shifts, doing group coaching, but also I was doing human design readings on the side too. I was still starting to blend things together. And, as you start to work with it and as you start to experiment with it, things just start to get more clear. So you start to see your next steps. And that was when I started to notice, I could do all of these things with human design. I could do mindset. I could do, help them with their lives outside of their business. So I played with different angles of it. But my clients kept asking me and kept coming to me back to me, asking about like content, creating content, showing up. And that was one of those things that it just continued to lead me down this path to where I am now, where yes, Pinterest is still a part of the picture, but it's not the full part of it. It's
Right.
it's yeah, looking at what you can create one step after the other.
Incredible. Absolutely
Yeah.
incredible. So, how can our listeners learn more about human design and working with you? You actually have a freebie that you said you would
Yeah.
share with our listeners. Can you tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that too?
Yeah. So if you, again, are completely new to human design and you want to learn, like, how can I get my chart? How can I get started with it? I have a free HD start guide. And this guide will kind of walk you through where you can go online to get your chart, how to pull your chart, what parts of the chart to pay attention to so you don't get overwhelmed. And then it has a few bonus training videos in there of how to, different ways you can apply that chart to your business. Um, and so that's a great way to get started with your human design. So,
Awesome. And the link so that you can access that is
yeah,
right in the show notes. So just scroll down if you are looking at this on the website or on YouTube, or if not, you can hop over to my link in bio if you're on Instagram and access that. Jen, thank you so much for coming on today. I'm gonna like open up my chart again and look into it after this conversation. I'm like, I am so intrigued. Like, I had no idea it could do all this. It could solve so many problems just getting it. This has been wonderful, and I appreciate your
mhm.
time so much.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Bye.